But first, you've got to admire Peter Dutton's calmness under fire, because he's not just fighting an election campaign against Labor, he's fighting against the Greens, the Unions and now the Teals as well. But more than that, in this election campaign like no other, the opposition leaders also faced a barrage of loaded questions almost every day from a media pack that's always trying to prove he's a fool or a knave. Basically, every question at every Dutton media conference is either an implicit criticism or an open challenge. Here's just some from yesterday.
The Liberal candidate for Fowler has had to apologise for social media posts where he repeatedly used derogatory terms to refer to Indigenous Australians. Is this the standard you will accept for Liberal candidates?
At this point, do you concede that it's now mathematically impossible for you to reach your migration cuts?
Why is Coalition disrespecting voters by not releasing the costings on the eve of the election?
Why didn't you disclose that you were the beneficiary of a family trust in 2014? So Dutton, aren't you being tricky with the truth? Not to answer today. Aren't you being tricky with your own truth at the moment?
No.
I mean, give me a break. Today, more of the same.
Now, John Howard made a concerted decision to preference One Nation last. Why are you preferencing One Nation second in the majority of electorates across the country?
How is it that the Liberal Party has recruited so many members of a religious sect who don't vote to hand out for them?
Why have we been skipped over?
Well, we're just going to...
You've called some journalists activists. What questions have you taken issue with?
And isn't blaming the media just a convenient excuse at this point of the campaign?
I mean, gone are the days when press gallery journos came up with a question out of their own head. You'll notice there that nearly all of them, well, they were reading questions off their phone. Presumably, that's the questions that have been supplied to them by Labor's Dirt unit. Now, I'm not against tough questioning. Of course our leaders should be, and would-be leaders too, held to account by a media that's supposed to speak truth to power. It's just that there we've got a guy in power as opposed to a guy out of power who's getting a much softer sort of scratch your belly sort of ride. Now, maybe they're all auditioning for a job in Albanese's office, given he's got a history of hiring press gallery journalists into his team, like The Guardian's Catherine Murphy. Who knows? But his questioning, Albanese's questioning compared to that of Dutton, is very different. All pretty respectful, even deferential.
I haven't even asked a question.
He says that Labor has run a campaign to suggest that he's in trouble in Dixon, and he's not in trouble in Dixon at all. Can I ask you, are you going to Dixon today, one? And two, what do you say about his accusation? Is he in trouble? Might Labor win his seat?
About the rise of right-wing minor parties, and do you think that Peter Dutton's recent comments in recent days have been an attempt to try stoke their voters over towards the Liberals?
Abrams tanks that your government pledged to Ukraine more than 6 months ago are still here in Australia. Is the United States delaying or blocking the transfer of these tanks?
I mean, every one of those questions, without fail, were a tee-up free kick to the Prime Minister. And yet, if any of those journalists actually switched their brains on and not just put their mouths into gear and do a bit more than scroll through their iPhones, there is so much that the Prime Minister should be grilled on why he pretended there had been no approach from Russia to Indonesia to fly bombers out of a base in West Papua, when he knew, we know that now from leaked reports, that there had been. On why he's routinely claiming that Labor turned a $78 billion deficit into two surpluses, when actually he inherited a $31 billion deficit, and the subsequent surpluses were entirely the result of a lucky commodity price boom. And credit here to old-school journalist Phil Coorey, who picked him up on this, but still, Albanese keeps repeating the lie. Here's Phil Coorey.
PM, look, you mentioned your two surpluses tonight, and if I can just take issue, the $78 billion you inherited deficit was actually a forecast. The actual number was $31 billion.
That was forecast by the former government.
Sure, but the actual number was 31.
Now, picked up on it, but here he is again today, the Prime Minister, repeating that claim.
You've turned around a $78 billion deficit the coalition gave to you. That was the forecast. The actual number when you came to power was $31 billion.
No,
should you be more honest about the figure?
That's not right. That was their forecast.
I want to come back to what Trudy just said there. They forecast $78 billion. What was delivered at the end of that financial year was $32 billion. You came to office in May that year. Are you saying that you turned around the budget by $50 billion in 6 weeks?
I'm saying their forecast was $78 billion in the budget that they handed down.
Now, all credit there to our own Trudy McIntosh, who, unlike many of those clowns, can actually read a set of budget papers. Today, the PM claimed that China and America were both Australia's best friends, as if.
Who are we better friends with, China or America?
Both.
Yet on Sunday night, after a bit of squirming, he accepted that China was our big strategic threat.
Does China pose the biggest risk to our national security?
Well, China is the major power in the region which is seeking to increase its influence.
Mr Dutton named China. You didn't.
No, I said China is
the biggest threat to Australia's security.
The country that seeks influence in the region to extend its influence.
Biggest threat, yes or no?
And that is what we are dealing with.
Threat.
Well, I'm the Prime Minister of a country, and how you deal as Prime Minister is diplomatically.
I mean, he is shameless. How can China be both our equal best friend and our biggest threat? But consistency, as you know, has never been a hallmark of Albanese's character, has it?
Photos with everyone, okay?
I stepped back one step. I didn't fall off the stage. Just one leg went down, but I was sweet.
What's the worst moment of this campaign so far?
Oh, probably falling off the stage.
Now, you said that was not a fall, you said.
I didn't fall flat on the butt.
It was an involuntary loss of altitude.
What I was asked. It was a joke. Chill out. Next.
But at the time,
chill out.
you said...
I stumbled. That's what happened. I laughed about it at the time. I laughed about it since. It's no big deal.
No consistency, no integrity, and even getting tetchy when journos come back at him. Now, I know the published polls are discouraging for some in the coalition, but this remains an election that will be decided by a whole lot of seat-specific local campaigns. And in just about every seat, the coalition has better candidates and more energised local campaigns than they did in 2022. And that's why I think this election's got a long way to run, especially if the coalition can finally make this a referendum on Labor, and how much worse a re-elected Albanese government would be instead of half-heartedly fending off Labor's smears against them. Take Labor's unrealised capital gains tax. Now, very little's been said about this new tax because mainly people don't understand how it would work. So here it is. Say your house is worth $1 million and it's had a 4% increase in value. Under Albanese's plan, you'd have to find the cash to pay tax on that $40,000 increase in value. An increase in value, I might add, that you've never actually seen because you haven't sold the house, you still live there. It's just that the value of your home has gone up on paper. And sure, Labor will say this is a tax we're only going to apply to superannuation accounts. But even then, just to those with balances over $3 million, when has this Prime Minister ever kept his word? Since when has Labor introduced a tax that it hasn't either increased or extended? Now, already the number crunchers have been forced to admit that this new tax will raise $7 billion a year, every year, within the decade. And given the estimated cost of Labor's net zero plans, as high as $1.5 trillion, says the experts, this is a tax that will just grow and grow and grow. First on big super balances, then on all super balances, then homes, on and on it goes.
My word is my bond.
This isn't a PM whose time in office has been marked by how many times he's lied to voters. His time's been marked by how many times he's been honest with us, given that's what's rare. Do we really want a proven liar back in the lodge? I mean, that's the question every Australian has got to ask themselves between now and 6 o'clock on Saturday night.